My two teenage kids and I just spent 6 weeks in Europe this summer helping Ukrainians displaced by the war. In preparation for this trip, I started my first ever crowdfunding campaign on GoFundMe to raise money for refugees. And I said that after the trip, I would give an accounting of how the money was spent. This video is my public disclosure of how we spent your money. I told my kids before we went that I was not taking them on a vacation. We were going on a service trip to help people in need. We would not be sightseeing or collecting souvenirs. The last thing I wanted was to be a war tourist. I also explained to my kids that this trip was not a reward or a punishment for anything. It was not about us. It was about helping the Ukrainians in need. In this video, I have blurred the faces of Ukrainians to protect their privacy. I've also blurred the faces of Ukrainian American volunteers and volunteers who have gone into Ukraine to avoid potentially putting them or their family members at risk. The first service project we did was buy about $1,000 worth of food in Poland and drive it to the border. There we met some Ukrainian friends. I had previously met a Ukrainian teacher through the Duolingo app, and she and other Ukrainian friends met us near the border and transferred the food from our van into their cars since we couldn't drive the rental van across the border. From there, we brought the food to their local Orthodox church, and in the church we helped box up the food from the larger bags of rice and grain and whatnot into smaller boxes to be sent to individual families in eastern Ukraine where it is needed the most. We met a lot of very kind and welcoming people there in Ukraine. They welcomed us into their homes and treated us like honored guests, even though we were there to serve them. After visiting Lviv and other places in Ukraine, we eventually made it back to Krakow, Poland, where we met up with this mother and daughter from Mariupol and bought them medications and tools the mother needed to work in Poland. There is so much to their story, but I won't share it on such a public forum as to avoid potentially endangering family back in Ukraine. We then drove this mother, her 2-year-old daughter, and grandmother, whom we met in the first hotel we stayed at, 3 hours to the border near Lviv, because after staying 3 months in a hotel, they wanted to go home to Ukraine, the same as many other Ukrainians. We helped them with their luggage as far as we could, right up to the border. We then started working every day side by side with Alan from World Central Kitchen, volunteering at a refugee center that everyone called the Plaza. There are many different refugee centers right now in Poland, and I believe in Western Ukraine and other neighboring countries as well. In Krakow alone, we wound up helping at 6 different refugee centers, but the one we worked in the most was the Plaza. The refugee center at the Plaza was a shopping mall that had shut down due to COVID. Somewhere between 350 and 450 Ukrainians lived in one end of the shopping mall, and the other end houses a clothing store called Shafa Dobra, full of donated clothes that refugees from all over the city are allowed to enter once a week and get clothes for free. Volunteers from all over the world help out at Shafa Dobra sorting and organizing donations. Outside in the parking lot is one of 4 World Central Kitchen food distribution centers in Krakow, and we got a hotel room right across the parking lot so we could be as close as possible to the plaza. Alan from World Central Kitchen is such an amazing person. He is doing so much to help displaced persons in Krakow. Beyond working at World Central Kitchen, he has been organizing activities for the children, raising money to send supplies into Ukraine, and helping out wherever he can. Just today, he texted me about raising money to help a disabled Ukrainian who could use a special bed and an electric wheelchair. Alan has raised enough money for the bed and is raising money now for the wheelchair. Alan himself was a refugee when his family was displaced by war in his native country of Bosnia and Herzegovina. One experience he shared with me was how his mother called him in for dinner from playing with his friends on the playground. Shortly after he left his friends, the playground was shelled and all his friends were killed. At the beginning of the war in Ukraine, he left his home in Spain where he was working as a chef and got on a train to Poland with less than 80 euros in his pocket. His goal was to go to the border crossing at Medica, but he found so much need in Krakow that he never made it to the border. He spent the first 3 months of the war sleeping in the Plaza refugee center along with the Ukrainians while volunteering at World Central Kitchen until they hired him and a crew of Ukrainians to run the food tents. Alan asked us to teach English classes due to the high level of interest at the Plaza, but that was just one of the ways we were able to serve.
And
Perfect. That's great. You can keep running. Yeah. Could you tell us about what this building is? What's inside of it? What goes on here? Besides the World Central Kitchen, what else happens here?
okay, here outside we have this tent where World Central Kitchen decide to serve the meals. But here in this building at Trust, in this building behind me, it's a refugee center. It's a refugee center where there will live 450 refugees. In the other part of this big building, it was shopping center before, but because of crisis, they rebuilt it in the refugee center. So here, 450 refugees lives here. In the other part of the building is Shafa Dobra, where all the refugees from Krakow can come here to pick up clothes, to pick up shoes, to pick up everything what they need.
Great. Besides the food and the clothing, what else happens here? Are there English lessons?
Yeah, a lot of individuals come here from all around the world, and we with them together. I'm very thankful now to all of these people, and we all together can make a lot of different activities. We take kids to the swimming, to the parks, to ice cream, playing games with them. Now one family is here. They are providing English lessons for them. And yes, really a lot of help from individuals from all around the world.
So, while we did help the World Central Kitchen chef relief team a little with food distribution and unloading truckloads of food, one of the main ways we served was teaching daily English classes. The room Alan found for us in the abandoned shopping mall for a classroom was definitely one of the rougher classrooms I had taught in. My son Jake can be seen here in this photo applying caution tape to a step in the middle of the classroom. Until I found a decent-sized whiteboard, we used the storefront windows as a whiteboard for English class. I got the idea of using windows as a whiteboard from my college students. In addition to teaching English classes, on day one of volunteering at the Plaza, we bought a bunch of supplies, such as laundry soap for the center, and we also took a van load of teenagers swimming to give them a sense of normalcy. We did this several times because the summer temperatures were often above 90 degrees Fahrenheit while we were there. We took 7 Ukrainians in our van to the pool, and another American volunteer brought one more teen by tram to the pool. Day 2 volunteering at the Plaza, we again volunteered our van to transport teenagers to go swimming. The thinking was that teenagers would be self-managing, but the Ukrainians running the center loaded our van with little kids and had a much larger group go by tram to the pool. In all, we had a group of 32 go swimming that day. As you can imagine, I spent the entire time watching the youngest children and delegated watching some of the other small children to some of the Ukrainian teenagers. We also took a group of 34 to a nearby aviation museum with Alan, and we bought a projector to show children's movies in Russian or Ukrainian. We also helped Alan with a field day where we set up a bunch of different games for the kids to play with. We took a van load of Ukrainian teenagers on a walking tour of a castle along with other American volunteers. We were happily busy volunteering at the refugee center, and then COVID hit us. First, I came down with cold-like symptoms and tested positive, and then my son became ill and tested positive. We lost an entire week just lying in our hotel room in quarantine. Fortunately, my daughter somehow never became ill or tested positive, and after a week both my son and I tested negative and we were able to get back to volunteering. We had very mild symptoms. I have had worse colds. Of course, we were all 3 triple vaccinated, so the vaccines appeared to have done their job in preventing severe illness. I want to thank the volunteers who painted the classroom and also the other volunteers who taught the English classes while we were in quarantine. Once we were finally out of quarantine, we were able to get back to work. We transported refugees to various different places and took a few van loads of young people swimming at a nearby lake. Then we received the devastating news that the lease on the plaza wouldn't be renewed and the refugee center there would be closed down in a matter of days. The hundreds of people who had lived in the plaza for as many as 5 months would again be displaced. As I mentioned in a previous video, the people in the plaza were assigned to be moved to one of 3 other refugee centers around the city, Sniadecka, Kapelanka, and Zlota. The assignments were posted on the wall, and I watched as 3 teenage friends read that each one of them was assigned to a different refugee center than the other 2. At the beginning of our service trip, I had questioned if it had been a good idea for me to rent a 9-passenger van, given how large the vehicle was and how narrow the cobblestone streets were in Krakow. Now, with the plaza closing, it became apparent how useful such a large van would be. This would be the busiest part of our trip. 2 days before the plaza was to close, we transported 4 families to different shelters, including a family of 5 whom we moved to Hotel Maria, a refugee center an hour east of the city. Serendipitously, 8 other American and British volunteers who happened to be members of the same church as us, 2 of whom spoke Russian and 1 of whom spoke Polish, all showed up to help the morning most of the people were desperately trying to move out of the plaza. I believe they wanted to arrive at the new refugee centers first to get the best spots. I don't know how the coordination fell to me, but at one point we were loading 5 vehicles at the same time to transport people to different centers. My daughter and other volunteers helped move baggage out of the plaza, while others of us helped load the vehicles, drive them across the city, and help them move into their new refugee center. I tried to get pictures of each family we transported just to keep track of how many people we were moving, but I didn't always remember to get a photo. And other times I would remember just as we were leaving and would just get a picture with one family member, and one family declined to have their picture taken with us. I think we moved at least 10 families that day. With the help of one of the Polish social workers, I also ordered 2 taxis to help transport people. The mother of one family trusted her 2 teenage boys with all the family possessions and documents to move into the new refugee center they were going to. When we transported another family to the train station, helping their grandmother move heavy bags, a Polish gentleman helped direct us to where we needed to go to buy tickets and where the platform was, and when I turned to thank him, he was suddenly gone. On the final day for the refugees to move out of the plaza, we helped move more people in our van and also helped load baggage into a bus headed to one of the refugee centers. We then helped clean out the plaza and then immediately started volunteering at the 3 refugee centers our Ukrainian friends had been moved to. We bought this young woman at Zlata a bicycle so she could travel around the city. We dropped it off on our way to Hotel Maria for a 3rd time, transporting other people to and from there. We also found yet another refugee center north of the city at Sioborowice, where we delivered food after coordinating with the Polish director there for a list of what they needed most. We were in a hurry to help at another refugee center, so even though we had just arrived and even though the people there offered us drinks, we weren't able to spend any time there. Fortunately, since our return, I have been able to direct subsequent American volunteers to make additional food deliveries at Sioborowice. One donor has also paid to have a refrigerator delivered there. With our Ukrainian friends spread across the city now, we started teaching English classes at 2 different refugee centers, Sniadecka and Kapelanka. I thought the classroom at the plaza was rough. At Sniadecka, we taught classes outside because there was absolutely no room available inside the old hospital they had converted into a refugee center there. You can see here one of the roomier accommodations at Sniadecka. This is how displaced persons have been living for months now, sleeping in rows of cots right next to each other in abandoned buildings converted into these refugee centers. This photo is of me conversing with some of the 5 deaf Ukrainians we met at Sniadecka. Although Ukrainian Sign Language and American Sign Language are different languages, my daughter and I found that we were able to converse with the deaf Ukrainians. They taught us some of their Ukrainian signs and we taught them some of our American signs. They conversed a lot with my daughter during our time at Sniadecka. Other ways we were able to serve included delivering supplies, bicycles, and a dryer that other American volunteers had purchased for Sniadecka. We also acted as security a couple times when dealing with intoxicated people, and several times we passed out hundreds of popsicles and ice cream cones that we or other volunteers had bought. And there were many more times we transported people to and from train stations, to the hospital, from the airport, and so forth. On our last day in country before flying out, we said goodbye to Alan and drove two American volunteers to the border as they wanted to volunteer in Kyiv. I have blurred their images and luggage here because last I heard at least one of them had gone on further to volunteer near the front lines. I gave them my coat and boots to take east, which they passed on along with other supplies that they purchased in Poland to take to eastern Ukraine. On our last night in Krakow, we gave away 3 phones, some cash, food, and other supplies we still had. My daughter spent the last of her savings account to buy a laptop for a young Ukrainian boy so he could attend school remotely in Ukrainian. It was hard to say goodbye to our Ukrainian friends. Most of the people I talked to during our time in Europe about coming to America said they would prefer to stay close to Ukraine and hoped that the war would be over soon. I didn't know how to explain to them how much better living conditions would be in America compared to the refugee centers, and they didn't like to hear it when I told them I feared that the war would go on for years. However, there were a few families that were open to coming to America. If you would be interested in sponsoring a Ukrainian family, please let me know because there are families that would like to come to the US while their country is at war. Also, if you want to go on a service trip to volunteer in Krakow, Poland, or in Ukraine and would like some information on where to get started, please let me know. I can get you in contact with people on the ground like Alan from World Central Kitchen who can help you find where you can help people in need. I also can get you in contact with people who regularly deliver medical and humanitarian supplies into Ukraine. There is a small army of volunteers from around the world that rotates every few weeks there in Poland, many of whom are just individuals who show up wanting to help. Everything there is done ad hoc, so the most important thing you can do is to show up. I met volunteers from Australia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Canada, Denmark, France, Germany, Greece, Japan, but mostly from Poland, the UK, the US, and Ukraine. If you want, you can either send these individuals money via Venmo or PayPal, or you can gather and send supplies to them to be taken into Ukraine. Another great way you can help is by donating to a trusted nonprofit organization such as World Central Kitchen. From what I was able to observe on the ground in Poland and Ukraine, World Central Kitchen was the one non-governmental organization that was doing the most there on the ground to help displaced persons. Thank you to everyone who so generously donated money to help the people of Ukraine. As I said I would, I will now go over how your money was spent. We spent just under $23,000 for this trip, a lot of which was for our own travel expenses. That's mostly our flights to and from Europe, the van rental for 6 weeks, 6 weeks worth of hotel stays, our food there, and also gas for the van since we drove about 4,000 kilometers. We spent $6,753.67 directly helping Ukrainians. In way of donations, we received $5,250 through GoFundMe. We received $695 through Venmo and $100 in donations through PayPal. Also, my daughter donated the last of her savings account for a total of $6,215. Here is a summary of how we spent your money. We spent $1,816.92 buying food for refugees. We spent $1,534.58 buying them phones, data plans, tools, a laptop, and video equipment. We spent $291.84 buying that bicycle and toys for the refugees. We spent $265.56 on medication and medical equipment. We spent $227.07 on toiletries such as diapers and soap. We spent $938.41 taking Ukrainian swimming and also buying them swimsuits since a lot of them didn't have swimsuits with them. We spent $263.47 on classroom supplies since, I'm a school teacher, so I'm serious about my classroom. We spent $577.76 getting hotel rooms for refugees. We spent $166.89 getting them train tickets, taxis, and gas, and that's not gas for our rental van, but for one of their cars. And we gave out directly to displaced persons $671.65 for a total of $6,754.15. So we spent a little bit more than what we took in donations.
Привет, це мій син Джейк і це моя дочка Marisol. So Jake, when we were in Europe, where do you think we did the most good as far as helping the Ukrainians?
I felt like it was when we were helping people move when the plaza was closed, shut down.
Okay. Marisol, how about for you? What service do you think was the most helpful or the most impactful for the Ukrainians?
English class. They seem to enjoy English class a lot. I mean, it can help them further if they want to pursue anything with English-speaking people. They can get jobs, and they seem to enjoy it.
Okay, thank you. Question for both of you. What could we have done more to help people there in Europe?
Well, see, that's a question on time. Like, if we had more time, then we could have done more. But even then, you always get a feeling like you didn't do enough, or like you could do more when you did as much as you could at the time.
Dobry den. I have shared with you a few different ways you can help the people of Ukraine. You can sponsor Ukrainian refugees. You can go to Europe to help. You can send money or supplies to volunteers on the ground. I can help you get in contact with trusted people there if you're interested in helping in any of those ways. You can also donate to the World Central Kitchen or another trusted nonprofit organization. There is another way you can help the people of Ukraine suffering from this war. It's incredibly important and won't even cost you a penny. Take a moment right now and send an email to your representatives in Congress and tell them we need to do more. I will include links in the description below so you can easily look up your senators and your congressional representative in the House of Representatives. Remember, you want to email both your representative in the House and your 2 senators from your state, and remember to tell them that you are their constituent. Even if you just send a one-line email saying, do more to help Ukraine, it would help. If enough of us email Congress, they will listen to us, their constituents. As the Danish Defense Minister, Borten Bodskov, recently said, Ukraine's fight is our fight. Make no mistake, Putin is a modern-day Hitler, and appeasing him by ceding territory will only embolden him to go after more and more. If Ukraine loses this war, Poland and the Baltic states will be next. The Communist Chinese government will likewise be emboldened if we fail to defend a free and democratically elected government in Ukraine. The people of Ukraine, through their courage and tenacity, have beaten Russia into a stalemate, but they will need our help to win an outright victory on the battlefield. Russia is in no position at the moment to take on NATO. Right now, we have an opportunity to send Ukraine the help it needs to decisively defeat Russia. Doing so would send a strong message to Russia and China that the United States and our allies will stand up for freedom and democracy, just as our forebears before us changed the course of world history for good in World War II and in the Cold War. This is the conflict of our time that will decide the course of world history for generations to come. Now is our chance to change the course of world history.